Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to this panel on reimagining K12 education in India. My name is Olina Benerji, and I'm a writer and reporter for an Indian publication called The Ken. I'm very excited to be at ASU+GSV. It's my first time, so I'm a little overwhelmed and I'm very jet-lagged, but I hope to make it through this one alive. I've covered EdTech in India for the last 4 years now, and it's been a time of great change, great scale, great ambition, and also great innovation. So just to set context, India has probably the largest school-going population in the world at 200 million students. So that's a couple of countries put together, I think. And obviously, when the pandemic happened, a lot of education companies, EdTechs in particular, rose to the occasion and provided access to a lot of students who didn't have access to EdTech before. And as a result, they also scaled. But what has happened is the pandemic has also exposed certain chinks in the armor. EdTech as a business in India, as a sector, has not been the easiest. It's been a tough nut to crack in terms of access and affordability for our students, and in terms of scale and profitability for our companies. So this is a good time to sort of take stock and reimagine what the next wave of innovation in K12 is going to look like. And I couldn't have asked for a better panel to help navigate some of these questions and these challenges, and to talk about where this innovation is going to come from. So just starting with Aditya, I'm going to ask the panel to quickly introduce themselves, and then we can jump into the discussion.
Hi everyone, glad to be here. I'm Aditya, co-founder of Doubtnut. Doubtnut is one of India's largest education platform with a simple USP. If you're studying, get stuck on a study question, you can click the picture and we'll send you a video solution of that question within few seconds. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pranav Kothari. I'm the CEO of Educational Initiatives. We make a product called MindSpark, which is serving both high-income students in private schools, but also serving students in government schools to sort of learn language, math, and science through an adaptive learning software.
Hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Stephen. I'm based in London at the UK office for Byjus. Byjus is a direct-to-learner, direct-to-consumer platform and product supporting millions of users around the world, from STEM all the way through to the arts.
My name is Sumeet. I founded Lead School, which is a school transformation company in India. We work with about 4,500 schools to transform their learning outcomes.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Rohit. I'm the co-founder for this company called Filo, where we have pioneered the concept for instant live tutoring. What that pretty much means is whenever a student now needs us, they pretty much press a button and we instantly, in like under 60 seconds, connect them to a one-to-one live video tutor. And what that has given us is a lot of leverage into building low threshold, high frequency conversational learning where students can really express themselves. Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. So I want to actually start the discussion with a slightly provocative question. I've been speaking to a lot of investors and educators, and present investors not included. What they tell me is K12 in India is dead. It's not a sector we want to invest in. There's no innovation. And I don't quite buy it personally, but I'd like to know from this panel, right? Each of you, I'd like to throw this question open. Where do you think, A, do you agree with the statement? B, where do you think we've lacked in innovation over the last few years when we talk about K12 EdTech in India?
The first statement, I would not say that it's dead. There are certain headwinds our way. We agree to that. In terms of where we have lacked in innovating, there are broadly 3, 4, 5 points on which I can point to. One is we have not yet looked at product/distribution-based approaches to building K12 story. It has so far been, very Salesforce-led approach. So that certainly has to change. Second is to do with collection of payments. In India, as you go deep down from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 towns and villages, you understand how difficult it is to take recurring payments, right? So that collection of payment has to be solved. It's more of a macro. The things are improving. It will improve in times to come. Third, and most importantly, what has happened both online and offline K12 is we have focused on taking payments upfront. We are not sure of our own quality that students will come back next month and pay for it. right? So that kind of has not resonated well with the students who are buying it. And their primary behavior offline had been to go to a mom and pop tuition center if they're in K12 and pay, 100 rupees, 200 rupees a month on month, right? So there we have not innovated enough, to bring closer to the behavior of the student on the ground.
I think, we found that students learn best when they're studying in a language that is familiar to them. So while we've made a product in 9 Indian languages, I think more innovation can be done so that it's relatable to them. Second is we have found a way to get philanthropy to support low-income students at tech in a very efficient manner. So our students are learning at a 1/10 of the cost of what the private schools are paying, but it's still a very profitable pace for us to be in. And finally, I think more organizations need to open up to be subject to third-party evaluations to know sort of what works, what doesn't, what's moving the needle on learning outcomes. And we have learned a lot from the 4 different agencies that have done third-party RCTs on our products. So these are the 3 spaces that we are pushing the innovation on.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to keep building on this theme because I think the provocation of the question is just it's gold for us to be able to respond to that. Because I think, in fact, EdTech in India worldwide has really just begun. And I think we've really seen the impact. And if I could sort of summarize where I think the direction of travel is that in this big question, which we all raise and we get pushed back around, and that is around equity. Yes, we can build great EdTech. Yes, we can deliver it at scale. Yes, we can raise outcomes, but can we also at the same time increase access and make sure that access is also equitable? Now that's a really big question, and I think that's one that we all are addressing. And I'll finish on this point, which is that another provocation that comes back to EdTech is, are you looking to replace schools? And I don't think anyone would ever suggest such a thing because schools are the cornerstone of just about, actually of every community, no matter where you are. And I think that's, our next level of challenge is how do we support those schools really effectively and those communities rather.
And thanks, Stephen. I would build on what you said, that it's important to frame this conversation in terms of not only direct to students, but also how do we bring innovation to schools? Because the fact of the matter is that 98% students go to school, only 30% take tuitions. So schooling, to me, in my mind, is core, which touches every student's lives, and then tuition, I think, is optional beyond school. And I would say that beyond the conversation between direct to students and school, the biggest innovation that we have to bring in is the focus on learning outcomes. We keep focusing on business models of reach, collections, sales, all of that. And while that is important to run a business, ultimately in education, I keep saying that Saraswati comes before Lakshmi, and for the non-Indians here, Saraswati is the goddess of learning, and Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. And in EdTech, I believe, if you don't deliver learning outcomes, ultimately, it's not going to be a sustainable enterprise. And I think there's more innovation required there to have, like Pranav said, independent evaluation, but also just designing the program with learning at the core before or around adoption and engagement. So I guess those are the 2 areas which I would think we should focus on.
Yeah, really touching upon it really quickly to the first provocative question, right? I come from a slightly different background. I don't come from an education background. I come from a background of building product experiences and services. So the first thing which I did when I came to EdTech was just try to calculate the consumer satisfaction score of the industry. To my surprise, it was really, really hard to define. How do you define CSAT in education? But whatever proxies we came up with all came back to the same answer, that education in India still continues to be the biggest industry with the lowest CSAT ever. Right, 60% of the students are outright not interested. A lot of them have no idea what to do. So innovation for the sake of innovation does not make any sense, but there are real problems to solve here. So yeah, EdTech, I think, has a long way to go. It's a huge opportunity in India.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you that we still have a long way to go. And it's good that we set out with these mission statements, and now we can work backwards on how to get there. So as I see it, innovation or re-innovation will come in 2 spaces. One is the kind of business models that we promote, and also the second thing is the kind of learning technologies or the ways of learning that we promote. So this question goes to I would like to see the B2C guys on the panel. I wanted to ask Aditya, Stephen, and Rohit, right? The predominant model has been the one-to-many live classes model in India, and it's proven to be cost-heavy, ops-heavy, right? There are problems with it, clearly. So I want to know from each of you, how do we get beyond it, right? What have you learned from your own experiences that we can say, okay, this is where we can still make it accessible, we can make it affordable, but we can also make it scalable?
A good one to ask. We still don't have a clear-cut winner to the final model which will work. But one thing that at Doubtnut we have seen is asynchronous model of learning. Our primary use case is you come, you ask what your questions are, and we'll answer it. And it has seen a huge uptake in the traffic, at least about 100 million questions being answered every month through our AI engine. Right, so that is more of a pull-based way of answering your questions wherever you're stuck at any point of time without depending on anyone. And given that all of it is completely automated, there is no cost of serving. The marginal cost of serving is zero. So you can continue to serve them at a free cost or at a very affordable cost. So the technology should come at the forefront. And like you said, with any live model, the cost of serving is a lot. Yeah. So if you can make it asynchronous, if you can build your products around it. We are experimenting a very similar thing with our long-form classes, where you go to a coaching institute to learn or a tuition center to learn. We are trying to see if we can provide the same outcome with an asynchronous form of learning. There's still a long way to go, but we are seeing some very encouraging results. If we talk in terms of, in K12 particularly, it's very difficult to measure the outcome. How do you define, what learning outcomes are the best? If I go by the objective way of, their standardized board examination, which happens in India after grade 10th and grade 12th, we have seen some very encouraging results there with our asynchronous form of learning.
That's really interesting, and I want to come to Stephen with that, because Byjus has always been a proponent of, asynchronous recorded learning, and you guys have large sort of content teams putting up this kind of quality content. So what do you think about this question?
Yeah, I think, of course, the balance between asynchronous and the opportunity for synchronous learning, and in person now too, of course, which is not an ironic kind of turn of the events, but given that Byjus and many EdTech comes from founding educators, and really the vision is to somehow encapsulate the pedagogy that delivers the outcomes into something that you can scale beyond a single classroom. So that's the core question. How do you take great pedagogy and then you deliver it at scale? So that's the problem. Now, how do you solve this and then solve it in a way that's at scale, but also equitable and profitable enough in order to grow a company and be effective? And I think what we're learning through the process at Byjus is that one-to-one, one-to-two or three, or one-to-many, and asynchronous, by using all of these various models, we're able to tease out where we need to develop and expand on certain services. As you also increase scale, it creates new opportunities also for variations in that bottom line price point, which can be a barrier for some, and it's certainly on our radar. Yeah.
So are we going to need very giant sales teams in the future to push these kind of models?
I don't know. I mean, sales teams are important, of course, and marketing is important, and messaging is clear. But one thing that's true about EdTech, and I've been in EdTech for, I could say 20 years if you count my PhD, but really 10, 15 years in earnest. Great EdTech benefits from marketing, but truly great EdTech benefits from people having an excellent experience, yeah. And that parent tells that teacher, and it really takes care of itself. And I think that's probably something I think we've all experienced with our companies.
No, I can really relate to it. When we started out, Filo didn't have any way to really market ourselves really hard to the market, and we are a practically post-COVID org, so the market was fairly saturated with narratives and everything. All we had at our disposal was our product experience. And what we have found was education was always an affordable, right? You're not building a new category. Parents are more than happy to pay for it. If you build out deep experiences, there is a very clear way for students to experience your product, as you said, feel the depth of it, and come back and pay for it in Indian market, right? I understand during COVID, there was a rush where everyone just rushed towards, as Aditya initially mentioned, right, to business sales-oriented models. But what we have found at Filo is people are more than happy to favor product experiences, even in Indian market, yeah.
Right, so I think the direction that I'm sort of taking away is that product-led companies are going to be the future rather than sort of the marketing-heavy sort of strategies that we focused on. I want to quickly come to the B2B side of the panel. And I just want to ask, do you feel happy that you maybe went with a more wiser, sustainable choice in terms of partnering with schools?
I mean, hindsight is 2020, so I mean, now you can say it is wiser and sustainable. I think for at least us, it was an article of truth that every child spends 6 to 8 hours in school. And that was the starting point that, and in India, we all know the quality of learning outcomes in schools, right? So if we had to transform education in the country, I mean, it was very evident that we had to first transform schools. And our experience has shown that if we are deliberate about it and if we take a system view of transforming schools, it is possible. We are currently being able to do it at a scale of about 4,500 schools. It sounds big, but it's still 1% of Indian private schools.
Right.
So I think the choice was very clear. The path was harder because Indian schools are used to using publishers and traditional textbooks. So to getting them used to using integrated systems was hard. But like Stephen said, I think in education, if one school sees effect, then they tell the other school, and then they tell the other school. So through word of mouth, now it is in a good place, yeah.
I think, if you look at maximizing learning outcomes as a value to be created, doing it with the school, with the class teacher is probably your best bet because that teacher is spending time starting out, explaining a topic, connecting it to real life. Now, what the teacher is struggling with is in the classroom, there are 40 students who are all at different learning levels with different learning styles. So the best value add that you can get to that teacher is give him or her digital assistants that can sort of adapt to a child's current knowledge state and help them learn forward from there, right? And that the digital assistant can provide thousands of questions for practice, which a teacher would never be able to correct in a notebook and give direct feedback. So I think a lot of value is created when you're working in tandem with what the school's curriculum, the teacher's lesson planning, and the after-school work that the student is doing is flowing back to the teacher, right? Today, when they go to a tutor, the tutor and the school teacher never talk to each other, and the child is super confused because they're learning two different things. But if the digital tutor can actually tell the teacher before they walk into class the next day, what's the classroom at? Where is the majority need? And the teacher teaches to that. Also takes care of the extreme ends where bright students are constantly challenged by content that is exceeding their capacity, and students who need more help are getting remedials. I think when you create value, your ability to capture a share of that value is much higher. So in our work with schools, we have found a 92% renewal rate with schools, but 113% revenue renewal rate with that 90% because you're generally creating a lot of this value, and schools are willing to sign multi-year contracts, which dramatically lowers the cost of acquisition.
Right. So that's interesting. And I want to stay with Sumeet and Pranav for a second because I think where the conversation is moving is towards hybrid education. And for the last half a year, there's been a lot of buzz about several companies, B2C, online companies opening up sort of offline arms as well. So do you guys feel like the OG hybrid guys who figured it out before the others? I want to start with you because EI, has had a long history with working with schools. So in hindsight, when we talk about learning outcomes, do you think you were sort of up on the ladder in terms of now what we call hybrid learning?
In terms of hybrid, meaning digital and the non-digital aspect?
Yes, broadly online and offline as we're looking at it right now.
Yeah. So I think there are certain things that human teachers have a comparative advantage, right? So when it comes to an activity-based learning, a group project, teaching values and attitudes, I think those are things that take advantage of the fact that 40 students have simultaneously come to a single classroom. And so how do you take the maximum advantage of that? Historically, that's not been the case. So even if there are 40 students in the classroom, the teacher is just doing a one-to-many instruction,
right.
Which is not, the students could be anywhere. But in the digital space, I think what works best is, can you customize it to the student? Because now any form of testing, any form of learning, any form of practice can be much better articulately tailored to the student. So I think blended has many, many definitions and words and insinuations, but I think the right form of blend is taking advantage of what humans can do in the classroom and what technology can do after classroom to help the teacher. And so from that perspective, we find that. And the adaptation can be not just in terms of the learning level, but a city in Mumbai, children have 4 different languages in the same school. And what technology can do is customize that instruction in the language that the child is most familiar with. So that's how I see it. But I think the biggest gap today is more on pedagogy, right? So today we have 1,000 books on how to run a lean organization. We have, in the medical world, we know how to come up with a new vaccine. But today you don't have great research on how to teach fractions, where if 100 students are in the classroom, how can 99 of them learn it? And so I think creating this science of learning, this research in pedagogy, is the biggest gap that I see today.
Right, and just taking off on that, Sumeet, I know that you've been very vocal about learning outcomes through your, school in a box model. So I just want to know, how do you relate with sort of this question of, were you always hybrid? Like, is what you do the definition of hybrid?
I think that if you focus on the truth, then it keeps getting different names over time. So nowadays it's hybrid.
The truth is a heavy word.
But tomorrow it'll be something else. But to Pranav's point, if your single-minded focus is on ensuring that when a kid comes to your school, you assess what their level, and then in a proven manner, you're able to raise their level by the end of the year. That's all that matters. Now, whether you're doing it in a hybrid manner, direct manner, personalized manner, differentiated manner, blended manner, and there are 5 other different, doesn't really matter. As long as you're able to prove both to yourself and to the parent that the child has visibly progressed on measurable learning outcomes. So that's been the focus. Now, the truth in India is that the aspiration is for English medium education, but students are coming from families which are vernacular. So therefore, the bridges that we have to create for these students are different, and that has to be taken care by pedagogies. And if you leave it to low-skilled teachers, then that's where the big breakdowns are. And that's why I feel that in school transformation, especially in a country like India, where 50% of education delivery is through affordable private schools, we've got to have integrated systems which support teachers at a fairly high level so that all teachers can raise the quality of their craft to almost international standards. And then the really good teachers will innovate even beyond that. But just to raise the tide is the first ask in schools. And that's what we've been focusing on. And once we do that, then we see the results. And then it's a virtuous cycle, because then cohort 2, cohort 3 is even better than cohort 1.
Right. I want to flip this question to sort of the online only or largely online, businesses on the panel. What is your view of hybrid being sort of the future of learning? And I know, Aditya, you have some thoughts on that, about the online-offline split. So I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Stephen and Rohit.
I started my career as a teacher from an offline institute. And I've taught students in a large classrooms where 50 or 100 kids would sit at a time. I believe in a country like India, where the population is so huge and so fragmented, as you move away from Delhi's and Bombay's, if you go to a village, the average school size is 50 students. Now, in such a setup, I don't think offline would be the most prudent way of doing it, the education. Right there, we believe the power of online has much more to offer, where even it does not matter how big the classroom is, because you are broadcasting to a very large population at one point of time. And hence, you can assure that the best curriculum, the best pedagogy, the best teacher is imparting the education to each and every student. If we talk about the offline, like we are hearing in the market today, it's only about 500 or 600 centers.
Right.
Sumeet gave us a very good estimation of the scale. He is going out to 4,500 schools in India, which is just 1% of the total schools. So 500 odd offline institutes is not going to change or bring out a paradigm shift in, providing quality education to most of these students. So which is why I still feel if online done well, would bring about the maximum amount of change.
Right, right. And I guess hybrid doesn't have to just mean online and offline. It can also be a split in your product in terms of live and asynchronous. But I want to come to Stephen because Byjus as a brand has been online for the longest time, but now in the last few years, we've seen a real big offline footprint come about in terms of acquisitions and also in terms of, in terms of strategy. So does Byju believe that hybrid is going to be the future of learning, both in terms of learning outcomes as well as in terms of the business model?
Yeah, I mean, what I think I would say to that is that I think, again, building on my colleagues' comments about scale, equity, access, and outcomes. One thing I learned, let me restart that. One thing I learned long ago when I was starting my teacher training many years ago is I learned from a master teacher, and that was she said to me, you know things are going well when you can go and have a cup of tea and all the children in the classroom are still working. so that's the key. So that's two things, you know, great pedagogy and great curriculum and content knowledge. So EdTech, you know, what we're doing here at Byjus as well too, can help, I believe, resolve that dilemma also in schools and at home as well. Anytime you can provide a tool that allows a teacher to do what she does in an expert manner, which really is to teach. And by teaching, I'm not talking about teaching math or science or cell biology or English or literature. I could go on, sorry about that list. But really it's what all great teachers do, and that is that they motivate, they understand, they reflect, they give summative feedback, informative feedback, and encourage a child to work forwards. And let me finish on something that I think is universal to both in India and also worldwide here in the US as well, is that there is a question about content knowledge and teachers' readiness in schools. There's a shortage of good teachers, not good teachers, but qualified teachers for specific subject areas. That's here, that's in the UK where I'm based, that's in India. And if we can help resolve that problem as well too, I think there's a really nice solution that blends between home learning, direct to learner, and in school. And I think that, to me, is a really bright future.
Right, right. And Rohit, I just want to come to you because you talked about the experience of learning, right, for students. And does this experience sort of involve, you know, offline aspect? Because you know, your experience of your product is completely online. So where do you land on this question of the future of learning being hybrid?
Yeah, great question. So what we realized, and when the way we started asking this question, in fact, from the get-go is not just online versus offline. Why is there an after school to a school to begin with, right? Why are there multiple studying format to begin with? Why are there primary, supplementary, complementary, secondary format, and there are a bunch of these formats which come into place, right? It is online versus online today, something else is going to be tomorrow. Is the core of the problem, at least what we found, was this format of standardized learning, right? You have, so far, if you look at traditional models, and EdTech tries to solve for a lot of part of it, you have this aggregation of students in the class still, right? We have tried to build a lot of personalized learning for the sake of it, but that has not really happened on the ground, right? So you have, if you look at a standard class, you have smart kids who are going to after school because what is being taught in the class is not their standard. You have the kids who are struggling, again, going to after class because that is being done again. So the question to what Sumeet said, right, earlier, the answer which we really found is it's not really an offline, it's not really a format discussion, right? But because what we are bringing to the table are completely new capabilities, right? For example, Filo at its disposal now has 50,000 tutors. Now we are going back to schools and asking them, what would you do if you had a button which can bring on board 50,000 tutors for you in whatever format you want? Right, so we see this as a great opportunity now, especially with B2C. So see, the B2C has not built, had never had the leverage of a structured education. No one student, parents paid to go to a B2C format. Students were not necessarily coming to us. So we really had to understand, build value, and capture students. Now, bringing all of that back, like schools have real opportunities here to take the learnings that B2C guys have had back into school after COVID. So I see this as a win-win situation, really.
Do you, B2B guys, do you have learnings from how B2C has unfolded? Because there is something to be said about customization and personalization that B2C to some extent has promoted in India, and it's been interesting to watch. But we're also a low-income country. We're also a place where students don't get access to affordable schools. They don't get access to quality education. So I want to understand, right, what can you take back from the whole personalization versus affordability problem in India? So maybe Sumeet and, maybe Pranav and then Sumeet, yeah.
I don't think it's a debate. I think we can do affordability and personalization, right? I think what we have at our disposal is, there are at least 10 million students today who have access to their parents' smartphone for half an hour per day, and I think that can be used. So we are delivering, learning every day for those students at a price point that is, very affordable as part of their data pack, and raising that money from philanthropy that is able to sort of pay for this. And I think we may need to continue to find, innovative ways to sort of solve for the bottom of the pyramid. That is not even eating dinner. Like many of my students who are studying every day are not getting 3 meals a day. But it's still possible to serve that. And technology is the only way that will make this both adaptive and personalized and affordable, right? There's no way you can do that without technology. So I think high quality in a manner that is serving all socioeconomic strata of the society is something that's an imperative for us to do it. We have 300 million students today. Only about 3% of that go to schools that charge more than $1,000 per year, right? So what about the remaining 97%? They need to be served at price points that are lesser than $20, $30 per child per year. So yeah, absolutely. I think those are the ways we have to make this work.
Is it a debate? Personalization?
Not at all. I think Pranav put it really well that the schools which charge more than 1,000, they are good for themselves. For all the rest, there is lead.
That's a great pitch.
That's a great pitch, yes.
Great pitch.
But so we've experimented a couple of things and they've worked out beautifully. One was this homework and practice test. So what students do is a classroom is at the end, you can bring in differentiation, but it is still 1 to 40. But when they go home, the homework on their parents' app and the practice test is personalized. But what's beautiful is that the teacher on her tablet next day gets what each student is. And because they are low-skill teachers, you have to still create groups within the class. So, just the 3 segments of slow, medium, fast, and we don't use these words, helps the teacher figure out, which group of students she has to spend more time. And just that differentiation is enough to ensure that the students who are struggling are brought to speed, and students who are doing well have a few extra questions to engage and, move them. So there are ways to solve it. And I completely agree with Pranav that this can only be done through technology. So it's not a question between adaptive and affordable. It is actually both. And there's a way to do it now.
Aditya, I'm interested in knowing what you think about the whole debate of personalization online versus sort of making it affordable and accessible to a huge mass of students, because I know Doubtnut has had that vision.
See, for us, like Sumeet and Pranav both pointed out, if you use technology properly, bringing adaptive learning, making it affordable is not a challenge. At Doubtnut, we see it at scale happening. There are students of various different backgrounds who come and ask questions and get an answer in the language that they are most comfortable with, right? And all of it is possible only because of technology, right? So technology has a large part to play. A bit of innovation will be required, or with what Filo is doing, that connecting to a tutor within seconds, right? The technology is bringing tutor to your doorstep. I don't know about the costs, but if you can make it affordable, it's a wonderful thing to have.
Affordability is also a range in India, so it's not an easy question to answer. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to ask this question to everyone, right? Why have we done so badly on tracking learning outcomes, or maybe at least publishing them in a way where we can finally convince parents, regulators, any stakeholders on that, yes, this works, right? K12 innovation, whatever we've come up with, it works. Like, why have we dropped the ball on really publishing learning outcomes? And can we do better now that we have really huge learning gaps in India? Students have fallen behind a couple of grades because of the pandemic. So as a final question, I want to ask everyone, how can we get better at this? And why haven't we gotten better at this so far?
I think it's because we haven't delivered, right? Parents are not going to read a published journal paper or read any study. They have to see that the education for their child is actually materially improved their lives, that they're able to go to market and do transactions, that they're not cheated with the next person that comes in, that they are actually able to earn incomes that sort of give them the confidence that education is worth investing in. Today, there are 30% of Indians who have gone through K12 plus 4 years of college and are unemployed. Right? When a parent looks at that, the parent is wondering, why do I even need to bother about sending my next child to education, right? It's because we have, as a system, have not delivered on sufficient amount of learning that has made an impact in the lives of the children that the parents are able to see value is the reason where we are. So we just need to work on this, and the publishing won't need to happen if they can see the benefits on the ground.
The problem is not the tracking. The problem is the...
In the delivering.
Is the delivery, yeah.
And I think the problem with K12 is, and I'm not talking about test prep, but in K12 is delayed gratification. After 13 years, you come to know. So we have re-articulated the challenge as how do we give them in situ, like every 3 months, a very clear, visible, and shareable learning outcome. And if parents see that, they don't have to wait for 13 years. They can see that their child is able to speak in English. They can see that their child is able to do transactions. They can see that their child is able to interact confidently when a relative or a friend is visiting. And these are very clear markers which parents know, tell them that my child is learning or not. So we have to just build that and be deliberate about it and not just be so focused in covering the syllabus and just transacting the syllabus. I think if we can focus, there is a way out.
Is it harder for B2C consumer apps to publish these kind of results or at least convince people that, there are results here?
It's not that difficult also, right? First is, like, we need to have agencies who can give us a good reporting on, on the learning outcome. They do. And we've gone to a few of them. We have published 1 or 2 reports from our side. But I'll end with a provocative note. In India, it is quite easy also to buy outcomes, right? So how do you actually believe in what is being said? Yeah. Right. And the best way is, like Sumeet or Pranav said, it had to be visible. It has to be visible with students and their family, and it has to flow from one mouth to the another. Right, that's the only way learning outcome can be, driven across.
It is a fairly long tail outcome. So I want to end with sort of a comment from Stephen and Rohit about this.
Let me just say that, of course, research and outcomes and benchmarked trials are really important, and I think all EdTech is recognizing how we can line up and report that in a way that is not academic, but understandable to parents. I would also say that everything that we build successfully is based on a whole agile development process, roadmap. No EdTech company that's successful builds in isolation. It learns immediately from the data that they're getting from their learners and from their parents. And so you could make an argument, of course, that all the EdTech that is working is producing outstanding outcomes. And I would argue in favor of that. So that's one. I'll finish on the point, which is, I think there needs to be a catching up of outcomes within the system. And I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about state systems. And we've all, as educators, recognized that outcomes can be problematic for learners. I think we're actually on the cutting edge of innovation of what a positive learning outcome is. So I think we need to bring the states along with us as well, the government along. So.
Yeah, so like Pranav rightly captured, right? What we have realized might be a controversial thing to say, but we as adults have no clue what learning outcomes should really be, right? The core contracts of education to employability have been broken. If you look at a post-pandemic war-like a situation where war is on a broadcast and students are exposed to it, there is no way even for an adult to evaluate what is it that this learning is resulting into. So there are no real incentives which can clearly be aligned and products can be built around. And we internally argue this a lot, and what we believe at least is that the next wave of K12 education is not going to be brought in by companies who are really, really good at coming up with solutions, but it's going to be brought up by companies who are really good at defining problems.
Right, right. And so I guess what I'm taking away is maybe we need to reinvent our metrics as well, right, in addition to everything else we do. But we're almost out of time, so I'd like to thank our panel very much for sharing their thoughts today. And I hope it's been a fruitful discussion for everybody. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And if you want to catch up with any of the panelists, I'm told we can't do it here. We have to move out of the venue so that these guys can get prepped for the next panel. But thank you so much. And we hope to see the next waves in K-12 education very quickly.
Thank you, Olina. Thank you, everyone.